everyone. Oh my gosh. Season 13 of Drink It in the podcast. I can't believe it. Season 13 when I think about that. Usually 13 is like the unlucky number, but for me, 13 is awesome. I decided for this season to do people that chose the Jewish path. And so that's why I'm calling it the chosen path. Hence, play on the words chosen people, but people who actually chose the path. Get it? And when I thought of doing this season, I came across an account on LinkedIn. Kylie Ora is going to introduce herself in a minute. I just want to explain how I actually came to her originally. For my job, my professional job on Olami, I need to find mentors, female mentors, to mentor my college students or young professionals. And one of the advice when I'm stuck on finding somebody is I go on LinkedIn and I put in a search of what I'm actually looking for, the job, the profession, how we match them. And Kylie came up. And I'm like, okay. And I asked her and she said, sure, even though she's all the way out in LA, and she was fine. And the person she was going to mentor was fine with the time difference. And then at work, it came up. They said, did you ever hear this Kylie Ora? Like, very interesting story. I'm like, she's our mentor. And I'm like, I don't know. It just like popped up on my LinkedIn. And I was like, let me go for it. So now that I had a little bit of a professional relationship with Kylie Ora, but not like I knew that much about you, I decided since I'm doing this season, I'm going to get to know you a little bit more. And so the audience will learn about you through me. So take it away, Kylie. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? And then you could even go into, when you start that story, what drew you into Judaism and what inspired you just to pursue that conversion process?
Sure. So it's a big question. Thank you so much for having me on. And I so enjoyed being an Olami mentor. Highly recommend it for anyone who wants to do it. So yeah, I'm from Baltimore. I grew up in a secular Christian household, didn't really go to church except for my Catholic grandmother would drag me, and I didn't really enjoy it. When I was a baby, my mother wouldn't have us baptized. So my grandmother put me and my sisters in the sink when we were born. And she said that my sister's baptisms were successful, but mine didn't work. I don't know what that meant. If I splashed the water away and said I'm a Jew, don't baptize me or whatever it was. But I just didn't really connect with Catholicism. Going to church was boring. I found it to be a bit dark. Saying the bedtime prayer, if I lay me down to sleep, was really, it really worried me that I would pass away at night, God forbid. So yeah, I didn't connect with it. And my parents got divorced. And back then I prayed to God that they wouldn't when I was 5 years old. And God didn't answer me. They got divorced anyway. A few years later, my other grandmother, who was my best friend, my advocate in the family, loved her so much, she got sick. And again, I prayed to God that she wouldn't pass away. And she did very suddenly. So that was right before I was a teenager, at a very formative time in my life. She passed away as I was holding her hand. And then nothing happened when she died. Her spirit didn't come out. I didn't feel anything. So I just thought, God doesn't exist. I talked to a friend who introduced me to the idea of atheism. And I'm like, okay, well, that makes sense because I've prayed to God. He didn't deliver. I've never seen a miracle. What are all these Bible stories that are crazy that they stopped happening? They don't happen today. And so it just made sense to me. And I became an atheist starting from when I was 12 years old. And that was, really tough. I'd think about, laying in bed at night thinking about the eternal abyss of blackness and darkness and what is the point of life? I had a teacher who said, you just pay taxes and you die. I'm like, I guess that's it, so.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But yeah, so the thing is though, that I didn't know any Jews when I was little, really. My uncle dated a woman who her son she was Jewish, he was Jewish. He kind of became my cousin, but that was it. And then I went to high school and I was surrounded by Jews in my public school in Baltimore. And all my friends were Jewish, right away. I immediately clicked with them. They were so different from my family, who's more waspy, quiet, secretive. Things are hidden. You don't really talk. The dinner table's silent if we even got together for dinner. And my friends were loud and outgoing and into musical theater. And really, I was like, this is the people I've been waiting for. And so that kind of got me started with Jews anyway, with the community. ended up dating a Jewish guy, did Pesach Seder when I was 16 years old. And then if you want me to keep going or you have any questions, it gets even longer.
Well, just to interject for a second, because as soon as you said Pesach Seder,
Yeah.
it reminded me my mother growing up was not observant. And she went to her first Pesach Seder when she went to my father's Pesach Seder when they were dating. And she describes what it was like for her. And that's why I'm curious to hear from you what it was like. She describes what it was like. And she says, she told my dad, I'm not eating anything. All these things look so weird until I smell it first. And he's like, I don't think you want to smell everything. She says, no, I want to smell it first. And then all of a sudden came the maror, and she smelled the maror, and she's like, okay, I'm not smelling anything else before I eat it. It's okay. So I'm just like,
funny.
what was that feeling when you went to the Seder? I mean, that's kind of weird.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I remember it was during the day. So, and it was like very reform, like I didn't know at the time that there were even differences between Jews.
Okay.
But yeah, it was super
Okay.
reform, and they had the jarred gefilte fish, and I tried it and I was disgusted. And then they had, to drink it down, I tried Manischewitz, and it was like very sickly sweet. So I was like, this is just terrible food. That was a tragedy of it, because like those communities, they should be exposed to good food. Real gefilte fish is delicious. So, but yeah, that was just like it was kind of like a funny story. But yeah, so then when I went to college, and I was just very anxious all the time. Like I felt like if I woke up on the wrong side of the bed, I was going to have a bad day. I wasn't grateful for anything. I just saw everything I didn't have. Whereas I could have been like, I'm young, I'm in college, I'm like living in New York. It's very exciting, all these things. I didn't see any of that. I just thought I just always focused on the negative and was depressed and anxious. And then in my senior year of college, when I was very lost, I just done an internship at The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, where I thought I was going to get this like TV writing job and take off. And I actually really hated it. I wasn't like the other interns. They were all like Ivy Leaguers and high achieving and A type personality. And I was like quiet, and it just wasn't me at all. And I thought, okay, now I'm like failing at my dream. And so I was super lost. Second semester of college, I'm graduating. I have no idea what to do with my life. I met a man named Daniel, and we started dating after college. And he was off the derech, which is not observing Judaism, for 11 years. But I was like, this is a Jewish guy. I always date Jewish guys. I was drawn to him. He's a comedian, so he's very funny. And so he was very anti-religion, just like I was. But he had gone to a local Chabad for Friday night dinners sometimes, because the Chabad rabbi was super nice to him and didn't put any pressure on him to become observant again. He grew up like modern Orthodox, and didn't have a good experience with it. But the rabbi was just like, come to our house for a meal and it's great. And one Friday we were broke, and he said, let's go to this Chabad house for Friday night dinner. I walk in, it's like black hat rabbi. I'm like, oh no, he's going to know I'm not Jewish. He's going to judge me. They're going to kick me out. But as you know, like Chabad wouldn't do that. They took me in, they fed me, they were so nice to me. And just sitting there, I felt this warmth inside of me that was like in my chest, and like felt like it was coming from my heart. And just sitting around the table with everyone, all different kinds of Jews, and listening to the rabbi and eating this warm challah and chicken soup, I just was like, oh, this must be God. Like somehow I knew. And then I became obsessed and wanted to go back every week. That started me on my conversion journey.
I love how you described that. Like, it gave me that warm and fuzzy feeling when you were just saying that. And I think what even was more special the way you said it is like, that to you was God.
Mm-hmm.
That warmth was God. When Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge, at the very end, it says that God dressed them. Not only did he make them clothing, but he dressed them. And the commentators say that it was like furs.
Mm-hmm.
So I always used to teach my students, it's as if God is giving them a big hug, like that warm, fuzzy, like teddy bear concept. So as soon as you said that, that's what conjured in my brain right away that you had that like that hug from God, like that you like this is God hugging you at that moment, and you actually felt it, and it's so special that you were so attuned. Sad that you were missing it in
Mhm.
your own life, but so glad that you had some sort of experience. Now, what was going through David's mind this whole time? You are feeling this hug.
Yeah.
I'm curious how he's experiencing it. How is he experiencing it?
Well, Danny liked Chabad, but
Danny, I'm sorry, I said David. I'm sorry, Danny.
but I don't know if you want to retake it or
That's okay. I'm sorry. I'm allowed to make mistakes.
okay,
Danny. I'm
all
sorry,
good,
Danny.
all
It's a
good,
D. I got the D. All
all
good.
good. So he it was fine until I really started wanting to do it. Like it was fine to go for Friday night dinner, but then I was like, all my friends were Jewish growing up. Like when I went to the Holocaust Museum as a kid, also, I really felt it. I really like had nightmares about it. I just there was always something, like I felt Jewish in some way, and I didn't know what that meant really. Like from pop culture, it's just eating bagels and Woody Allen movies, but I wanted to explore what it really meant more. And so I wanted to start taking classes, and he was adamantly opposed to it. Me doing an Orthodox conversion, I didn't even know what that meant at the time. But so I tried to do a conservative conversion, and the rabbi told me to come back when I was ready to get married. I was nowhere near ready to get married. I was only 21. So then he sent me to the 92nd Street Y, where I did an introduction to Judaism class with an Orthodox rabbi there. He just happened to be teaching it, which was kind of strange because 92nd Street Y isn't Orthodox. But I just really loved everything I was learning. And he told me after the class was over, it was like a several month class, to then Google synagogue near me and try to find even more conversion classes. And I Googled and I didn't know it, but the first one that came up was also an Orthodox synagogue, and they happen to be doing conversion classes. Again, very strange because a lot of that's rare that you would even find that. So I started going, and my husband, who's now my husband, sorry, spoiler, Danny wasn't happy. Um, he had given it up. He was fully into comedy, like performing on Friday night, which you're not supposed to do if you are Shabbat observant, and just really in that culture. And he didn't want to have to give that up. He didn't want to go back to observant Judaism. So I said, well, I'm just going to keep going to the classes, and maybe you'll change your mind. And he was adamant that he wouldn't. And then one time he showed up, and he's like, I'm going to give the rabbi a piece of my mind. So his goal was to get the rabbi like angry or upset with me and kick me out of the class and say, you can't convert. So he went in. This was the Greenpoint Shul in Brooklyn, where there's not many Jews anyway. And the rabbi was Rabbi Maurice Applebaum, and he was so sweet and nice. And Danny just like went off on him on everything. Danny had been kicked out of yeshiva for a bad reason. Didn't even make sense. He had left the path. So he just went on a whole rant and tirade against the rabbi. And the rabbi said, I totally understand if you never want to come back. What happened to you was very hurtful. And I get where you're coming from. So yeah, you don't have to come to class. I get it. And no one had ever validated Danny. And that's what worked, because then he was open to having a conversation. And a few weeks later, he came to class with me, and that's how we got started.
Wow. So where did he grow up?
He grew up in Long Beach, New York.
Ah, okay, fine. Okay, and then the two of you are living in New York.
Yeah.
Going to the classes. And now finally he felt validated. He's now going to the classes. Okay, so now how are the families taking it? Like, what is your family like and friends thinking about all these interests into Judaism? Are they accepting of it? Are they just sitting in the background? Are they getting nervous? And then I'm curious about Danny's family.
Yeah. So my family was just like, okay, this is like a different thing, but we don't really care because they're not religious. It's not like I was facing like people who are like super Christian or anything. My mom,
Okay.
her first reaction was, oh, this makes sense because you were a lonely kid and this is good for you, good community. I actually had some friends who were Jewish at the time and very secular, and I'd be like, "Hey, where are you going for Shabbat? You go to synagogue?" And I didn't realize that they didn't go, and like that kind of upset them. They're like, "Well, we don't go to synagogue." I'm like, "Oh, okay, I don't know." So they thought I was trying to impose on them. I really wasn't. I was
Mm,
just new to it,
right.
and didn't know all the politics or anything. So
Mm,
Danny's family, it was definitely hard at first, like for his grandma, because she survived the Holocaust, and now her grandson's
mm,
dating a non-Jewish girl, and what's it going to be? But then once her and everyone else saw I was serious, and um, you know, he wasn't going to intermarry. Everything was fine, and I totally respected that too. Like I saw their perspective, and that she was a survivor, that he was sent to yeshiva. You put all this time and energy into raising your kid in a Jewish home, and then he goes and does this. And I wasn't the first non-Jewish girl he dated, but I was the first one he was actually serious about. So yeah, once they saw
mm,
that, I was actually, they were always nice to me, but they stopped being worried, once I started
right.
like dedicating myself to it. And yeah, they welcomed me into their home for Shabbat way before I converted. Took me to their synagogue, which was, he's Sephardic. He grew up in a beautiful Moroccan synagogue. I loved it. It was just really touched my heart. Um, so yeah, it was not too much drama, thankfully. And my family's still very accepting of it today. And also, of course, there's so many Orthodox Jews in Baltimore where my family is that it makes it really easy when I visit. They'll order me kosher food from all the great restaurants
Mm.
there. And it's really nice to go home, and I have my family, but then I also have a community there. So it's great.
Wow, that's so beautiful. And I think I would think that because they were always so caring and nice to you, that probably helped. Uh, if they weren't, perhaps that could have turned you away a little bit. It's probably I don't envy them, and I'm not to be in that position, his parents, of how to handle such a situation. You never know as a parent. You're a parent, and like how do you let your kids know that something's okay, but then still love them and accept them for who they are, but to know that perhaps you're not following in our values. It's a
Yeah.
very challenging. Seems like they handled it well, especially for your situation, which is really very nice to hear.
Yeah.
Oh, were
Yeah.
there any like, yeah, right? That's what you're saying. They handled it really well, which is really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Were there any like big surprises to you, like, or unexpected challenges that you encountered when you were, in this whole process, in this whole conversion process? Like, did you like say, okay, I'm done. I can't do this. I give up. Like, did ever like something really jar you?
I never said that. What was really different is that, yeah, like the pop culture idea of Judaism, as I said, is like bagel, Woody Allen movies, like all these kitschy things like neuroticism, anxiety. And in the Orthodox world, I really don't see that. Like overall, Orthodox people to me are very not full of anxiety most of the time. Like some people are, we're still human, but it's more
Right.
so about like trusting in God, being joyful, not giving into these feelings, and really trying to always have faith in God. And like walking into Chabad on Simchat Torah, you really see that. Like it's so joyful and happy. Whereas if you look at Orthodox community on Netflix, you're like, this is dark
Right.
and depressing, and I don't get why anyone would want to be a part of it. And it's abusive, and you just learn all these things that really aren't true. And it's very joyful. It's l'chaim. It's to life. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And then I was surprising how easy kosher came to me, even though like I didn't live in a Jewish neighborhood at the time and didn't have access to kosher food really. Um, I'm a big animal lover. I have 7 pets. So once I,
Wow.
yeah, once I learned like the laws of kosher slaughter, I was like, oh, this is so compassionate. Like I'd be vegan if I could. I just don't want to be. I tried it, but um, once I learned these laws, it was awesome. And like I did kapara before, which is using the chicken before Yom Kippur to quote unquote erase your sins, or however you want to describe it. Just the way they did that was so nice. The chickens didn't see it. I have chickens, so they like gently waved them over my head. I know it's not always like that, now I do it with coins. Yeah, that was surprising how easy kosher came to me. But as an animal lover, like and then also like the teaching that you feed your animals before yourself, that really struck a nerve with me. Like I really enjoyed that. So just, yeah, how compassionate Judaism is towards all creatures. It's very caring. And Shabbat too, like just how different it was from the everyday. Like it's, especially now, like when I first started converting, it was in 2010, but to now, just the amount that devices have taken over our lives and how bad social media can be for us. I'm just so glad for that break every single week. And then on the holidays, I really think everybody needs it, even if you're not Jewish, just to like take that break. It's such a difference on Shabbat than being in like the real world, quote unquote.
Right. Wow. It's so funny. So I was going to ask you if there are certain laws or customs that really connect you, but it seems like that concept of tsar balei chayim, of not harming animals, since you're so connected to animals, so many pets. I got to hear what besides chickens, what else you have in a second. But that sounds like that is something that really spoke to you because you seem to be an animal lover, which is beautiful. And now, because of technology, it also seems like Shabbat definitely speaks to you as well. Taking that break, as we like to say, disconnect to connect. And that's a very famous way of looking at it, to disconnect to connect. So before you tell me about all your different pets, are there any other customs or laws or mitzvot that you feel like as time moved on, you really got to know even better, and you're like, okay, this is really speaking to me even more now?
Yeah, I think just saying Modeh Ani every morning, where you're grateful to wake up, because as I said before I was Jewish, I'd wake up on the wrong side of the bed and I'd say today's going to be a bad day and couldn't see any of the blessings. But if you start your day with Modeh Ani, with gratitude, then you see all your blessings and you realize just how wonderful things are. And even if something goes wrong, you're just able to say, you know, God doesn't want me to go that way today. I'm going to try a different way. I've seen so many times in my life that God was protecting me from something when I look back. And you don't always see that. Like, I'm not going to say that's like a surefire thing, but when you do, it's just so beautiful. So just being accepting of what happens in your day to day. I think, you know, when I wasn't religious, or when I see people aren't religious and they're just complaining about everything, and I see that one problem will go away and I'll be like, that's great, congratulations. And they'll just bring up another problem immediately. I'm like, do you ever give yourself a break to just say thank you? Like, even if your car breaks down, or like you don't have money in your bank account, or whatever it is, like you're breathing, you're here. God is keeping you here. Every day God wakes you up again, gives you life. And that's at the very least what you should be thankful for. And that's huge. So just that gratitude really keeps me going.
Wow, you know, I just love everything that you're saying, because especially the way you started off when we started our conversation, and you were saying how you had that sense of loneliness, and that you were very attuned to, you know, the pain that you were going through, and that it was like, it sounded as if you were describing, I don't mean to make it sound so dramatic, but empty. There was a sense of emptiness. Even what you were describing about home life or having a meal in your home, and then when you in high school, when you were with other friends, the Jewish friends, their life was just filled. It, you know, even with just noise, right? The way you were describing, and then how you're now describing the spirituality aspect of Judaism, that it just filled you from the inside out, of not being someone who's anxiety stricken because of perhaps understanding and believing, and then, you know, it's just like, it's so beautiful to see it through your eyes. That's what I'm saying, that to see Judaism through your eyes, and it makes it so much better, you know, for somebody who was raised Orthodox. I also was raised modern Orthodox, but still it's just so beautiful when you see something that belongs to you and you're connected to, and then you see the beauty through someone else. But I got to hear about the pets. So what do you have besides chicken? Let me hear it.
We have 2 dogs. We have 3 chickens, a tortoise, and a cockatiel, a little bird.
Wow. And you have kids already, correct?
2 kids, yeah.
And one on the way, just letting everybody know. This is great. B'shat tov, as we say. Everything should go well with you. So you have two kids. How old are they?
5 and 2.
5 and 2. Wow. Okay. So you're gonna have 2 in diapers. It sounds like.
Yeah.
You'll have your
Yeah.
hands full. So what
Yeah.
brought you all the way to LA? I know you're living in LA. When did you guys transition to LA? Why'd you transition to LA?
A few things. One is I visited California when I was a teenager and I fell in love with it, mainly that there was no humidity. It was
Okay.
just like the perfect weather. So I always had it in the back of my mind to live in California. And then my husband did too. He visited Venice Beach as a child and loved it. He's like, I want to live here one day. We don't live in Venice Beach because it's crazy, but um,
Right.
he's also a comedian, so Danny Lobell. So it was either New York or LA. And then the third thing is that we had a crazy neighbor gangster who was like doing tattoos in his apartment and yelling at his dogs, just, like all this crazy stuff. And we had to move. The problem is we were rent controlled. New York is super expensive. You have to make like 80 times your rent. So we literally couldn't move anywhere else in New York City because of the cost. And I was like, how about
Mm-hmm.
instead of like moving, because we weren't having a good time trying to find a comparable place to live, let's just move to LA and move to a Jewish community there. So in the middle of my conversion process, we packed up and we moved to Pico Robertson, which is one of 3 like major Jewish communities here. So, and we fell in love with it, and it's very like out of the box community. There's a lot of converts, there's a lot of Balchuvas, there's Persians, there's Moroccans, Ashkenazim, um, old, young, like all different types. And that's like we fit in outside the box. So um that it's just really a beautiful community and very tight knit, and everyone's so nice. Like people say LA people are fake, but not in the Jewish community. Everyone's very authentic, um and also I still love the weather. It's amazing.
So I'm going to ask you this question. I know your oldest is 5, so
Mhm.
that means like kindergarten or something, right?
Yeah.
So so they haven't really gotten so entrenched in the school system.
Hmm.
Because I was going to ask if you've come across any uncomfortableness, like because that is spoken about, unfortunately, within the Jewish community, especially the Orthodox community, where they say, "Oh, she's a convert,"
Hmm.
right, and that perhaps the kids aren't as quickly to be accepted. Have you had that experience at all?
Not at all. I've in the
Oh,
Orthodox community, especially, like no one has, like everyone's been so welcoming because it's such
okay,
I think it's like one of, if not the most repeated mitzvah to welcome the convert. So
100%.
people take it very seriously. And since there are so many converts here, like, no, that's not an issue. But I mean, I think school is very hard. People switch all the time, I've noticed. And thankfully we have an amazing school. Like my daughter knows more Hebrew than I do already, and all her teachers are Israeli. It's immersive Hebrew and English. So I'm just very proud that even though I'm like, I want her to do better than I like I'm doing with my Hebrew. Like I'm so proud of her. She knows all the prayers and everything like that. I'm like, go for it. Like be smarter than me, please.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah.
So, how do you handle holidays? Like, if you want to visit your family, well, how do you handle those situations, especially with the kids?
You mean secular holidays?
Yeah, well, I mean, but let's say, they'll see like Christmas
Hmm.
by your parents'
Yeah.
home or something like that. Or is that something that you just don't even talk about with the kids? Or do you explain to your daughter? I mean, she's 5 already. You could say, "Oh, grandma and grandpa, whatever you call them, they celebrate Christmas. We don't do that." Like, I'm curious how you handle that.
Sorry, it froze a little bit through the question. Um, so yeah, usually we don't take them home around that time of year, but we have. And my daughter knows that, um, we have non-Jewish family members and we also have non-Jewish friends. So I say like that's their holidays, we have our holidays. We're all good. Like, nobody's better than anyone else. You don't have to be Jewish. Um, and I actually wrote a children's book called Jewish Just Like You that explains this. It's for the children of converts, where they get to see like both sides of the family and how they're both valuable. And I list like Valentine's Day in there. It's not as like uh it's not as forbidden as Xmas, I guess. But yeah, so I
Right.
teach her to be accepting, and I don't know, I tell her like Jews are a small part of the world, like we have a special mission. Um, but yeah, she'll see people driving on Shabbat and is like, are they Jewish? I'm like, no, and it's okay. They don't do Shabbat. We do Shabbat, and it's special and it's wonderful, and
Mm,
you should be proud to be Jewish. So I don't know how much she grasps yet because she's only 5, but just try to teach her to
mm,
be accepting of everyone, and yeah, it's really nice. And Hanukkah falls out
mm.
around the same time. They get the
Oh, that's
presents.
really
They're very
beautiful.
happy.
Yes.
Yeah,
This year, I think it's exactly the same time. So get ready.
yeah,
It's exactly so funny. I want to ask you, I want to ask you about your name. I think, if I'm not mistaken, is Ora is what you picked.
yeah.
And I was just curious, what made you think of picking Ora?
Yeah, so my Hebrew name is, I wanted to keep my first name because I love it. My parents gave it to me, but so it's actually Ronit Ora. So my husband
Oh,
said,
okay.
like, since you were depressed in the past and everything, try to pick a name that means happy when you pick a Jewish name. So I looked up Ronit, like I knew someone named Ronit. I thought it was a really cool name. It's Israeli. It means like joyful singer. So I picked that. And then Ora came from my husband's friend, Seth Glass. He sadly passed away, but he was a very soulful musician. And he's like, oh, you emanate light. So you should be Ora. And I just loved it. I thought it was really cool. So just having like happy and light. And it just really was the person I wanted to be after I converted. And I try to live up to that. I try to provide hope for people in a very chaotic world. And
Yes.
on social media especially, I try to be what's called a timeline cleanser, where like you're just doom scrolling through negative, 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 and then you see me and you're like, oh, that's kind of nice. This is something that uplifts me, because I always appreciate that when I see that and these nice stories. And I don't want to be in this negativity all the time. The world will always try to get you to be like fearful and depressed, especially the news. Like
Right.
social media and the news thrive on you being depressed and fearful and worried. And I'm like, nope, I'm not going to give into that. I never talk about politics. I never talk about dark things. Like, I'm always like trying to just be the light, because we need it.
Yeah.
We really need it. So
Yes, we do. We do. Wow. So beautiful. So do you think there are any misconceptions that people have about converts? That maybe you want to like tell people you got it wrong, like, you know?
yeah, I mean, they do have these misconceptions, but it's not their fault. It comes from the media. Like, for example, there
Mhm.
was a show that everyone's like, oh, you should watch. It's about a convert. This was recently on Netflix. I know Netflix's history, and it's not a good track record for the Jews. The only one that was good for us was Eliza Ben Shalom. Everything else was negative.
Right? Wasn't she awesome? I agree with you.
Yeah.
I thought she was just awesome.
Yeah.
Really.
She was like a great mix of modern mixed with showing that we're like real humans and like relatable, but also like being proudly Jewish. So that was great. Glad they got that in before October 7th and all this craziness happened.
Right.
Because like people like my sister were watching it. They're like, oh, this is really cool to learn about. It was great. Um,
Right.
so yeah, there's like a new show where the family uses shiksa. I hate that word.
Yes.
I rail against it. It's very offensive to
It
Jewish
is.
women and non-Jewish women, because it puts non-Jewish women on a pedestal. And that's not a good thing if you're trying to get your child to marry Jewish. It's saying that Jewish women are naggy and this and that, all these bad stereotypes. Non-Jewish women they're easygoing and more attractive, and it's like these are not even true. So it's offensive to all women.
Right.
And it's even as a comedic device, I don't like it. It's just a super offensive word, and I think yeah, it shouldn't be used. And I was called a shiksa. One of my ex-boyfriends, his sister
Mm.
said shiksas are just for practice. So that made me feel like cheap. Like
Right.
it was horrible. Like if she could see me now, like, look at me. Like, I'm an Orthodox Jew. Like, what are you talking about? It's not a nice way to be to anyone. Um, so yeah, there's like these stories that are just like, oh, I met this like Jewish guy and he was nice and I converted for him and I'm not actually going to practice anything. I just wanted him. That's not true. Like a true convert, even though like Danny introduced me to it, I was still going to convert, even if God forbid we broke up. I was still going to do it.
Mm,
Like they can be the spark that gets you interested in it. I never would have known about Chabad if it wasn't for him. But once you're like serious and you start doing it, you're doing it for yourself. You don't do it for them. So,
right.
yeah, I wrote about this a few years ago because people were questioning like Ivanka Trump, and I think also Jared Kushner's brother also married a convert. And I said, look, even just because they fell in love doesn't mean they did it for the guy. They did it for themselves. Like if you become observant halachic Jew, it's a very tough, long process. It's not easy. It's not like you just
Right.
say a few words and you're a Jew. So I'd say that's like the main misconception, that we just do it to get the guy and that's it. We're not serious, but we really are.
I think anything in life, if you do it for somebody else, it never sticks anyway.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and this is like a real commitment. So,
Yeah.
for the Orthodox conversion, obviously,
Yeah.
that's what we're referring to, the Orthodox conversion. So, yeah. Um, Weren't you like, it was just because when you went to that 92nd Street class, is that what you're saying? That's what really introduced you to the Orthodox way? Like originally that probably wasn't necessarily where you were headed, perhaps, right? Because right, you had said, Danny had said you could try, look, but we're not doing it, right? That's what he had said. Now, what's his feelings now? I'm curious if you could share. Like now that he's looking back, is he grateful? Like, is he appreciative of the return back to this lifestyle?
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, he was very spiritual. He was always like the one in his family checking like hechsher's on things, like being hechsher is like the kosher symbol, being like the most like stringent one. He loved his Rabbi Asher Avitan of blessed memory, um, in the Moroccan shul. When he got kicked out of the yeshiva for bad grades in secular studies, which was unheard of, and then no other reputable yeshiva would take him. They didn't believe him. So then he went to a public school, and he got permission from his rabbi to wear a baseball cap to school, and then the rabbi helped him get permission from the school to also wear a baseball cap because you're not normally allowed. So he always had it in him, like that he was still spiritual even when he wasn't like Shabbat observant, for instance. Um, so yeah, when I came along and he started going to classes again, he saw that he was doing it on his own terms and that there's more than one kind of community out there, and if you don't fit into one, there's others. So I mean, today he's very happy, and we moved very slowly though. Like it's been 14 years since we first went to Chabad together, and um, you have to do it slowly. Like if you do it too fast, you'll get like really into it and then you'll bounce back. Usually that's what I see. So over time we just build up more and more, and yeah, he's like returning to his original like spirituality, but then also adding to it. And as I said, LA is so diverse, and I gravitate more towards like Ashkenazi, he gravitates more towards Sephardic, so like we can do it all. um and that's really nice, and also just the warmth of the community like really drew us both in. For instance, when you have a baby in an Orthodox community, not only do you get gifts and people like asking what they can do for you, but you get meals every night for a month.
Mhm.
And, you know,
Right.
everyone really steps in. Whereas we came here not so religious, we weren't observing Shabbat yet, and we weren't going to people's houses. And it just is like super lonely. Like, to be like floating in the world without a community. I don't know how people do it. I really don't. You really have to find a community. And if you're Jewish, it's so easy.
Right.
It's amazing. We're the most amazing community.
So when was your conversion? How long ago was your conversion?
So I ended up doing two of them. So the first one was
Okay.
in 2015 before we got married. That was Orthodox. And then I wanted to make sure it was certified in Israel. I tried. And then I found out it wasn't. There's only 40 Beit Dins that are That's like rabbinical
Of course.
councils or
Hmm.
however you describe it,
Right.
that are certified in Israel. So just in case I wanted to move to Israel or like my kids wanted to move there, I wanted to make sure that it would be accepted there. So I did a second one when I was pregnant with my first child, and that was like a sped up thing because they said, "Yeah, you're Jewish, you're Orthodox, so we accept it. Just yeah, if you ever want to go to Israel, it's good to get this too." So that one took 5 months since I already knew basically everything. And another
Right.
surprising thing is just the things you learn. Like I
Yeah.
thought it would be these lofty spiritual concepts, and it's that a little bit, but mostly it's like, how do you make Israeli salad on Shabbat? They asked me right before I went in the mikvah.
Oh,
Like,
did they? Oh, that's so cool. That's so interesting.
I was like, I hate tomatoes. I would never make this. I was like, but yeah, like, what are some laws of on the holidays? What can you do? What can't you do? Like, it's all practical and nitty gritty. I was pursuing a conservative conversion at first, and it was like, when is Yom Ha'atzmaut? When is this? It was just very different. But here it's like
Mm-hmm.
you'd have to learn kosher very well. You have to learn Shabbat very well, and then laws of family purity between the man and the wife. Those are like the three big ones. Um, and yeah, like when the first time I converted, the rabbi said, right before I dipped, like you could eat a cheeseburger last Shabbat in Venice Beach. He was very specific. And he's like, the Shabbat you can't. Is that okay with you? I'm like, yeah, like I'm good. So just like you don't expect these little funny moments and like
Right.
very specific questions. And you think they'd ask you like, what is your belief in God? And like just spiritual things. And it's not like that at
Right.
all.
Okay, so now I have two things to ask you. Two things came to mind because I once interviewed another couple that were converting for a different season called the Dynamic Duos.
Mhm.
And they were telling me that they loved Shabbat, but they weren't Jewish yet. So they couldn't technically keep Shabbat. So they had to intentionally do something that was, the term we use is desecrated in Hebrew, the Mechalel Shabbat, something that was having them break Shabbat. So you had to do that same thing.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
yeah.
what would you do? What was your breaking of Shabbat then? When back
I
then?
mean, like turn on a light switch or
Right,
something.
that's what they said. They said just turn on a light switch. That was what they
Yeah,
did. They said, but it was so weird for them.
yeah. It's also like very weird. Yeah, when we were like doing half Shabbats, I
Right.
really didn't like it because once you're introduced to the concept of Shabbat, you're like, I really like this. I really want to do it. Now that I know this other like planet, it feels like another planet. Now that I know it
Right.
exists, this other reality, I feel weird not doing it. But there's a gap between like how long it takes to actually do it if you're a convert or a Baal Tshuva. And I hated being in that gray space. It was awful. Like I'd rather not know about Shabbat and not do it, or know about Shabbat and do it fully. Um,
Right.
so yeah, I don't get how people like know about Shabbat and then they're like, I'm just gonna go and like go grocery shopping on Saturday. It's very strange also. Like people love Friday night dinner and then they won't like do the whole Shabbat. That always eluded me. I'm like, what is it about Saturday that's so much harder? What is it about Friday that's so much more special? I think my conclusion is that Friday is go, 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 and it's like very natural to then stop. But then Saturday, you're like, oh, I'll just go, go, go again. So I think people have a hard time like keeping the full Shabbat. But yeah, as I said, like if anyone's listening and doesn't, just do it very slowly and it's amazing. And you have to be in a community. You can't be by yourself. You have to really be somewhere where you can have guests and you can go out and be surrounded by people. Otherwise, you're going to gravitate towards your phone or the TV because it's going to be lonely. Like being lonely on Shabbat is the worst. I've experienced
Yes.
it.
It's the pit.
Yeah. I mean, if you're like getting a break from your screaming children, that's fine. But if you're like single or something, or like when my husband would go out of town to do comedy, it's really tough.
It
So
is.
like, surrounding yourself with people and just having meals and connecting without your phone being out is amazing. Like I really
Mm,
recommend that. So if
mm,
anyone's listening, like go and join an actual community because that makes all the difference in the world.
right. I think in general, in any aspect of our lives, there's something that we want to work on, community, support groups, that's really enhances and helps in our growth and our success. Let me hear about the first mikvah. How was that mikvah experience? What was that like?
yeah, it was funny because it was right before my wedding, and we got some dishes that my mother-in-law wanted to bring to the wedding, and she said, "Would you mind taking these in with you to toivel them to make them kosher?" And I was like, "On the day of my conversion, you come to me and ask me to do this?" And we both laughed. She's like, "Yeah, I guess not." um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's fine. It's like not it was just much less momentous than I expected. I mean, I was happy to be done with it, but again, like it wasn't like some big feeling. I had been doing it for 5 years at that point.
Ah,
Um, it was
okay.
just I was just happy to be done and like say I'm Jewish now for
Right.
real.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was like I just saw the humor in it, and it was a good experience. And then the second time was really special because I was pregnant with my daughter, and it was very meaningful. And yeah, it's not this big dramatic thing like if there's any movies or TV shows about it that would make you think. Maybe for other people. For me it was
Sure.
just like, okay, this is just a natural thing that I have to do now. And
Mm.
yeah, some places the mikvah is very fancy and everything. We have a nice one in LA. It's very Hamish, and
Right.
yeah, it was fun.
And so then, is there such a thing? And I'm making this up, so don't. If I'm like wackadoodle in my head, so I'm sorry about that. Uh, you happen to be the first person that I'm interviewing, so I'm like trying, getting it down pat a little bit. Birthday. Is there such a thing as celebrating the day of conversion? Was that considered because that's the day that you are now Jewish? Is that like, you hear what I'm saying? Like, or is it, no, the day that you were born is the day that we're celebrating? Does that make any sense what I'm talking about?
I don't celebrate conversion day. I don't know anyone
Okay.
who has, but I did celebrate
Okay.
the day. Um, and yeah, like I went and got like a nice coffee and it was fun. Went out for a meal. And um no, so the theory is that if you converted that you had a Jewish soul all along. So I guess it would just be like still your birthday. And that like
Yeah,
our souls were all at Sinai.
right.
So yeah, no, if someone celebrates it, fine. It's good reason to have cake every year, I guess.
If like anniversaries or
Yeah,
somebody, but I guess you just be, it's part of your life now. So it's not something
yeah,
that, right, I hear. So now I
yeah.
have a funny question. You ready? So I want to do something interesting. Talking about our five senses, is there a certain sense out of our five senses that you feel is the strongest? And then how does that connect to your life now? That sense,
Mm,
like that draws you more with the Judaism, your life. Which one of those senses do you feel the strongest connected to?
man. Wow, that's a good question. I mean, the first one that came to mind is smell.
Okay.
Um, I think just because, Hashem blew, I'm not a rabbi, but Hashem blew life into Adam through his nose.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's a lot of things with smell, like Havdalah is also about
Mm.
Adam. We look at our fingertips because Adam was made of nails, I believe.
Mm.
And
Yes,
so
correct. You're all
Hashem
good.
changed us. And then we also smell every week. We smell something nice to start the week to invigorate our soul because the end of Shabbat is supposed to be kind of sad that
Right.
you're leaving this holy time, and we sniff nice scents, and we also have like a warm cup of tea or a hot shower or something just to reinvigorate our senses and give us that warm hug, as you said. So I really enjoy that. I really enjoy during Havdalah every week. Like we have orange blossom scent, and with my husband, I went to Morocco, and I absolutely loved it. Like aside from Israel, Morocco is amazing. And I smell that. I'm like, oh, it smells like the Middle East. It smells like Israel. It smells like Morocco. It's like such a nice way to start the week. And then there's also just all the cooking, you know, when you walk into someone's home and you smell a certain smell, like chicken soup on a Friday night, that's amazing. Or challah, things like
Right? Yes.
things really invigorate you. I feel like scent also take you back to a certain time in your life. It's very holy scent. So I'm
I
trying to
love
think of
that.
even more examples, but those are the main ones that come to mind.
Those
Yeah.
are beautiful. This
Yeah.
the sense of smell. I love that. My son used to say when he was little, he says, Ima, you know why we eat cholent on Shabbos? I said, why? He goes, so that when you wake up in the morning on Shabbos morning, Saturday morning, you smell the cholent from your bed and reminds you it's Shabbos. Don't touch the light.
Yeah. That's nice. Yeah. When I walk
Yeah.
in the shul and I smell that, I'm like, oh, it's so nice. Like
Right.
I never eat cholent during the week. I don't get people who have the leftover cholent. I'm just like, oh, I couldn't even eat it at 1 p.m. It has to be like as soon as services are over and it's hot and it's
Right.
amazing. Not even 10 minutes after. It has to be right
Wow.
there. But that's the best. It just reminds
Wow.
you every week this repetition of
Wow.
Shabbat is here, and it's so nice to have this in our lives, this routine. It's really
Wow,
important.
that's beautiful. I want to really thank you, Kylie Ora, or Ronit Ora, right? I want to really thank you. First, thank you for being a wonderful mentor for Olami at the time, and now really thank you for taking the time. I know, God willing, B'Shah Tova, you should really have a nice, quick, smooth, healthy birth, and I'm looking forward to hearing about it, and looking forward to just watching you as your journey unfolds. And that was one thing, you used to talk about smell. I said, there's one thing they haven't gotten yet on technology. You see the people post all the different food, but we can't smell it yet. So I would say that I would like to smell all the different foods and all your experiences, but I will have to just imagine them.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks.